Chapter 12. Counter-ambush. Counter-ambush is a tedious, time-consuming effort requiring route planning, patrols, timely intelligence, counter-ambush drills, and flank security. Planning should ensure that alternate routes and times of travel are used, that potential ambush sites are cleared, and that movement through areas is coordinated with local forces. Movement details need to be safeguarded and deception measures taken to prevent ambush. Vignette 1. Caught in a Soviet Ambush by Malawi Moyadin Balak. In 1983, we had one GMC pickup truck to support my force. We called GMC pickups Ahu, deer, since they were fleet and nimble. It was the month of Ramadan, and we were going from our base in Kala-i-Na to Kotolak to get some gasoline. Soviet soldiers were the main source of our gasoline. We would buy it from them. Our rendezvous point for gasoline was north of Kotolak. We left early in the afternoon and drove along the river, avoiding the main roads. Map 12-1, Kotolak. There was a Kochi in our truck who had visited our base, and we were giving him a ride back to his village camp. As we got about 10 kilometers south of Kotolak, we saw the Kochi's camp near the river. We stopped, both to let our passenger off and to wait for dark, since we were now within 50 kilometers of the Soviet base at Delaram and should not travel any further in the daylight. We watched as the Kochi entered the woods some 500 to 600 meters away on his way to his camp. We saw some people attack him and drag him to the side. We didn't know what was going on and thought that it was a fight between Kochis. "What's going on?" we yelled. They did not answer, so we fired some shots into the air. The people who grabbed the Kochi realized that they had been seen and started firing at us. We exchanged fire for about a half hour until helicopters landed behind the wooded area. The other group boarded the helicopters and left. It was late afternoon. We had prematurely and inadvertently triggered a Soviet ambush. We were on the western bank of the Kash-Rud River, and the ambush force was on the eastern bank. Soviet ambushes were always better planned and prepared than those of the DRA. The Soviets would drop their ambush party by helicopter at night, and the party would walk into position so that their ambush could not be detected. This ambush party was probably from Dalaram and had probably moved into their wooded position the previous night. The Soviets suffocated the Kochi who had been our passenger and had killed another Kochi earlier in the same fashion. The river was fordable, so after the helicopters left, we forded the river to look at the ambush site. Villagers found the bodies of the two murdered Kochi. We crossed back to the west side, got in our truck, and began driving on the road to Kotolak since it was now night. About 2 kilometers south of Kotolak, the Soviets had set another ambush in some hills straddling the road. We were moving in enemy territory, and I considered the route dangerous, so we stopped short of the hills, and I had 7 of my men dismount and walk the road to the other side of the hills, checking for ambushers. If they saw nothing, then we would move the truck forward. This left 8 mujahideen with the truck, 3 in the cab and 5 in the pickup bed. My 7 walkers walked past the hills, checked for ambush, and gave us an all-clear sign. A signal rocket. The ambush party let my walkers pass through unmolested. When we saw the rocket, we moved out confidently. Suddenly, I thought that someone had set us on fire. We were in an ambush kill zone, and bullets were flying all around us. 2 men in the truck bed and the man next to me in the cab were killed. The driver was wounded in the shoulder. 1 tire was hit. The driver slammed the truck into reverse gear and tried to drive out of the kill zone. He drove the truck behind a sheltering hillock and stopped it. I had 3 KIA and 2 WIA. We changed the tire and left the area in the dark. My walkers continued to Kotolak. Later on, the walkers returned individually to my base camp. As we were reversing the truck out of the kill zone, the body of one of my dead mujahideen fell out of the truck bed. The next day, when we returned to recover his body, we discovered that it was booby-trapped. We had to tie a rope to our dead comrade and drag him from a distance before it was safe to carry him home for burial. Commentary. At the first ambush site, the Soviets failed to put out flank observers and consequently were surprised by the mujahideen in their stationary truck. This failure compromised their ambush. At the second ambush site, the mujahideen walkers walked around the hills, not along the military crest where the ambushers should be. The ambushers wisely let the patrol pass to concentrate on the vehicle. However, the Soviets failed to employ directional, command-detonated mines or an RPG to effectively stop the truck in the kill zone. Further, the ambush commander did not know the size of the Mujahideen force and, following the ambush, did not pursue the Mujahideen or push out a patrol to determine the Mujahideen's position and status. After the first ambush, the Soviets knew that the Mujahideen intended to move north. It was also clear that the Soviets were in the area, yet the Mujahideen did not contact other local Mujahideen groups to check on Soviet and DRA activities in the area. The factionalized nature of the resistance prevented the spread of tactical intelligence, which may have saved the Mujahideen from disaster. Vignette 2. Ambushed at Farza by Commander Sofi Lalgui. In April 1984, the regional Mujahideen called for a shura, local council, to discuss local issues and decide on common approaches. Sofi Rasul and myself were to attend as local Mujahideen commanders from Farza. The meeting would be held 5 kilometers to our north in Estalif. We were accompanied by 28 Mujahideen armed with AK-47s and 2 RPG-7s. Someone must have been working for DRA intelligence in our area, since the DRA knew about our plans and set an ambush on the trail near Farza. We left Farza while it was still dark so that the enemy would not see us. Our route took us between 2 hills near a DRA air defense battery position, map 12-2 Farza. We were about halfway to Estalif at a point which we call Wotak. When the enemy opened fire on us from the surrounding hills, a DRA force had set up the ambush during the night. There is no doubt that they knew the exact route we would take. We went to ground in the kill zone and tried to find good fighting positions. The firing was fierce, we were totally surprised, and we did not know the enemy strength and exact positions. Our return fire was ineffective and uncontrolled. As dawn broke, our situation improved slightly, but we were still in shock. I had no command or control over my men, and they acted as individuals trying to break contact and leave the kill zone. Enemy fire was still heavy. During a lull in the fighting, I managed to find a few Mujahideen sheltering in a ditch. I led them to the safety of the mountains in the west. 12 Mujahideen eventually reached the safety of the terrain folds and mountain valleys in the west. 2 others and myself were wounded. We remained hidden in the valley until we saw the ambush force leave that afternoon. Then we returned to the ambush site where we discovered that 18 of our comrades were killed. Some of their bodies were mutilated by the enemy and most had their clothing shredded. Late that afternoon, we moved their bodies for burial. I do not know if there were any enemy casualties, but during the fighting I saw helicopters landing and taking off. They may have come to evacuate dead and wounded. Commentary. This successful DRA ambush inflicted more than 60% loss on the Mujahideen force. Soviet DRA recruitment of local agents and informants gradually expanded their intelligence network in the Afghan rural areas. Often, agent-informant information was not timely, but when it was, the Soviet DRA planners reacted to it. Intelligence was central to Soviet DRA ambush planning and attempts to assassinate Mujahideen commanders. The Soviet DRA usually conducted ambushes based on hard information and seldom placed random ambushes on the hope that a force might stumble into it. If the Mujahideen felt that they were moving through uncontested territory, they often failed to post route security or send forward and flanking patrols. This lack of attention to tactical security stemmed from the notion that they completely controlled the countryside and that the DRA Soviet forces were unable to operate covertly in the countryside for long. This overconfidence cost the Mujahideen dearly. The Soviet DRA forces exploited this Mujahideen hubris by setting ambushes even in areas located deep inside Mujahideen-controlled territory. When ambushed, the Mujahideen had difficulty maintaining command and control. This exacerbated the situation and increased their casualties. Mujahideen commanders often failed to train their personnel in drills and counter-ambush procedures. In this example, the commander lost control immediately and failed to regain it. This was a contributing factor to the very high Mujahideen losses. Further, the middle of a kill zone is no place to establish a defense. If the commander had a counter-ambush battle drill where his men immediately assaulted into the teeth of the ambush, more of his force might have survived. Vignette 3. Blasting out of an ambush by Amir Mohammed. It was in 1985. We had a large truck that we were hauling weapons, rockets, and ammunition in from Pakistan to our base camp in the Arghandab River Valley. No map. We were taking a circuitous route. We neared Lora near sunset when we saw a helicopter. There was nowhere to hide since we were on an open plain. The helicopter landed and Soviet soldiers jumped out of it and took up positions all around us. We stopped the truck, jumped out, and took up positions all around the truck. We had 13 Mujahideen and there were 10 to 12 Soviets. The Soviets had the advantage of better weapons, position, and firepower. We started firing at each other. The Soviets started to advance on us. The driver was afraid that we would be captured, so he took a jerry can of gasoline, poured the gasoline onto the truck, and set it on fire. He yelled at us to take cover. Despite the Soviet small arms fire, we scurried to new positions for cover. Soon the fire reached the ammunition and rockets, and the truck exploded with a tremendous roar. The rockets and rounds were not stacked neatly, but were stacked in every possible direction. Consequently, the rockets and bullets were exploding and streaking off in every possible direction. It was spectacular. The explosion and flying rounds frightened the Soviets. They ran back to their helicopter and took off. After the helicopters left and things stopped exploding, we walked to a nearby village. Neither side had any casualties, but we lost a good truck and lots of ammunition, and we had to walk back to our base camp. Commentary. The Mujahideen felt that they were in a secure area and were driving during the day. Usually, Mujahideen trucks moved at night. Evidently, the Soviets hoped to capture the truck, or they would have shot it up and created the same explosion that the Mujahideen did. Vignette 4. Caught in a DRA ambush by Malawi Mohyuddin Balak. In 1986, we were moving 3 pickup trucks full of ammunition from Iran to our base. We had 2 motorcyclists patrolling 5 kilometers in front of the pickup trucks. We were near the border of Iran at Shand near Helmand Lake. There is a point where 2 hills constrict the road and limit maneuver. The DRA border guards set up an ambush there. No map. Our 2 motorcyclists rode through the ambush zone and the DRA let them pass. As the motorcyclists cleared the ambush zone, they saw the DRA. They dismounted their motorcycles and took up firing positions on an adjacent hill. Our trucks rolled into the kill zone. The motorcyclists opened fire on the ambushers to warn the pickup trucks and to distract the ambushers. The DRA opened fire and hit the middle truck. The first pickup truck drove out of the kill zone, while the Mujahideen in the last truck dismounted and attacked the ambushers. The DRA fled. We lost 2 Mujahideen KIA and 1 truck was damaged. There were no known DRA casualties. Commentary. When Mujahideen felt that they were in a secure area, they would move supplies during the day. The Mujahideen felt secure in this area since they were moving in the daylight. Still, they had a forward patrol checking for ambush. The patrol, however, seems road-bound and did not get off the road to check likely ambush sites carefully. The patrol had no communication with the main body, so when the motorcyclists finally detected the ambush, they were unable to immediately contact them. Consequently, 2 of the 3 trucks were in the kill zone by the time the motorcyclists opened fire. Still, there was enough spacing between the trucks, which prevented the entire force from being in the kill zone simultaneously. The Mujahideen showed aggressive spirit and resolve by immediately assaulting the ambushers and driving them from the scene. The DRA controlled the dominant terrain and had the opportunity to prepare fighting positions. They should have been able to stand, yet they fled in the face of Mujahideen resolve. The immediate assault into the ambush probably saved the Mujahideen convoy.